The movie begins at New York Airport, where college student Chloe arrives and calls her mother, Irene, to let her know she's home. Irene tells her that her father's birthday party has been canceled because he was unexpectedly called to work. Since her father is a pilot, Chloe decides to stay at the airport to find him. Meanwhile, a religious woman approaches TV reporter Cameron, urging him to embrace faith and claiming that the tragedies he witnesses in his job can be understood through scripture. Chloe cuts her off, arguing that innocent people are suffering for past sins and that working in mysterious ways isn't an excuse. The woman leaves, and Cameron thanks Chloe for stepping in. She explains her mother is also deeply religious. In the parking lot, Chloe's father, Rayford, removes his wedding ring before meeting stewardess Hattie. Inside the airport, he spots Chloe and rushes over to hug her. However, Chloe isn't pleased, having noticed him flirting with the stewardess. She calls him out, pointing out that her parents' relationship has been strained for a while. Rayford explains that they married young and that people change over time. Ever since Irene became obsessed with religion, living with her has been difficult. Spotting his missing wedding ring, Chloe accuses him of taking today's job just to be with Hattie. Rayford ignores the remark, hands her his car keys, and walks away. Chloe agrees to have coffee with Cameron, and they discuss how absurd it is that people thank God for tragedies. Their conversation is interrupted when an employee hands her 2 U2 tickets for London, meant for her dad. It took him 2 weeks to get them, proving that today's trip wasn't a last-minute assignment, but something he had planned. Frustrated, Chloe hands the tickets to Cameron and asks him to deliver them instead. As Cameron and Rayford board the plane, Chloe finds her dad's wedding ring in his car. At home, she greets Raimi and chats with their mother. The conversation starts off friendly, but when Chloe mentions the incident at the airport, Irene starts preaching. Frustrated, Chloe walks away. Needing a distraction, she takes Raimi to the mall. He worries about their parents, but Chloe assures him everything will be fine before hugging him. Suddenly, a flash of light blinds Chloe, and when she looks down, she's holding Raimi's clothes. He's gone. All around her, people realize their loved ones have vanished. Panic erupts as a driverless car crashes into the mall. Chloe checks inside and finds the passenger dead. Chaos spreads as looters take advantage, grabbing items from stores and bags left behind. Outside, traffic is at a standstill. Meanwhile, on Rayford's flight, some passengers make small talk, while others prefer to be left alone. Once the plane reaches cruising altitude, Rayford slips out of the cockpit to secretly meet Hattie and show her the tickets Cameron delivered. Suddenly, the plane starts shaking, and passengers realize many among them have vanished. Panic spreads as the aircraft loses altitude. Rayford rushes back to the cockpit and finds his co-pilot missing. He quickly takes over to stabilize the aircraft. Meanwhile, Cameron records the chaos as terrified passengers pound on the cockpit door, demanding to see the captain. Hattie fails to calm them down, and Cameron tries to help, but it's useless. Seeing this on the cameras, Rayford increases the cabin pressure, causing the oxygen mask to drop. Struggling to breathe, the passengers have no choice but to return to their seats and use the masks. With the situation under control, Rayford tries to contact air traffic control, but no one responds, and his phone isn't working either. Once everyone calms down, Rayford restores the pressure and steps out to address the passengers. Using his authoritative voice, he urges them to stay in their seats, reminding them that panic will only make things worse. Meanwhile, Hattie realizes her fellow stewardess is also missing and rushes to the cockpit, seeking comfort from Rayford as she struggles to hold herself together. Since everyone is already out of their seats, Cameron resumes recording and interviews the passengers. Nobody saw anything unusual, and the disappearances happened in an instant, leaving only clothes behind. A panicked woman rushes to the bathroom to take some happy powder, then returns to her seat, insisting none of this is real. Cameron tells her to get some rest and notices she's written, "It's not real" on her hand. Meanwhile, a Muslim man suggests they pray, but another passenger argues that they worship different gods and can't pray together. Before the argument escalates, Rayford announces he's turning back to New York. At the mall, Chloe pushes through the panicked crowd, struggling to move forward. She reaches the parking lot to search for Raimi, but is forced to run when a small plane crashes, destroying Rayford's car. With no other option, she starts walking. 2 bikers pass by and snatch her brother's bag. Just then, a crash on the bridge sends a school bus plunging into the river. Chloe rushes to help the passengers but finds the bus empty. She keeps moving and tries calling home, but no one answers. Chaos fills the streets as cars crash, and an ambulance arrives for the injured. Hoping Raimi might be among them, she runs toward it, only for the police to push her back. As she continues through town, the glass doors of a jewelry store suddenly shatter, and a dead robber is thrown outside. The store employee steps out with a gun and aims at Chloe, forcing her to run. She eventually reaches the hospital and notices a sign reading "The end is here." Inside, the news confirms that disappearances are happening nationwide, fueling the chaos. The hospital is packed with desperate people searching for their loved ones, making it impossible for Chloe to reach the entrance. Determined to get inside, she circles to the back and breaks a glass door to sneak in. Chloe weaves through the crowded corridors and reaches the nursery, only to find it empty. All the newborns are gone. As she checks the nearby rooms, a mother approaches and reveals that children of all ages have vanished, not just in the USA but worldwide. Meanwhile, Rayford spots another plane on the same flight path and attempts to contact its pilot, but there's no response. He soon realizes the aircraft is without pilots, though a few passengers remain on board. Hattie hurries to instruct passengers to fasten their seatbelts as Rayford maneuvers the plane, narrowly avoiding a collision. However, the wing scrapes the other aircraft on its way out. Cameron watches from the window as the damaged plane plummets in flames. Amid the chaos, a passenger uses the distraction to search the Muslim man's bag, suspecting a bomb, only to find an electric toothbrush. One passenger argues that humanity lacks the technology for such an event, suggesting the missing people were taken by aliens. Moments later, others call Hattie over to point out something strange on the wing. Concerned, she asks Cameron to take a picture and bring it to Rayford, who determines the wing is barely holding and landing will be difficult. With the autopilot down and unable to leave the cockpit, Rayford sends Cameron to check if anything is leaking from the damaged wing. Cameron checks the wing and confirms the plane is losing fuel. A nearby passenger notices and starts panicking, while a woman breaks down, insisting she must return to where her child disappeared. Suddenly, flames erupt from the wing, causing the plane to shake violently. The passengers scream in fear, but Hattie and Cameron urge them to stay calm, knowing panic will only make things worse. Cameron informs Rayford, who says their only option is to reach New York before the fuel runs out. Fortunately, the fire dies out on its own, but with so much fuel lost, they'll need to descend sooner than planned. Meanwhile, Chloe reaches her neighborhood, where people mourn their missing loved ones. She rushes home only to find it empty. Her mother's jewelry lies abandoned in the shower, and when she checks the phone, the only message waiting is static. Chloe finds Irene's Bible and, overwhelmed with anger, throws it out the window. Desperate for answers, she visits the local pastor, who tells her this was the rapture. Those who vanished were taken to heaven. Despite preaching for years, he admits he never truly believed, which is why he was left behind. He explains that God took the children and the faithful to spare them from the darkness ahead. This only fuels Chloe's frustration, and she yells at the pastor before storming out. Rayford searches his co-pilot's belongings and finds a watch engraved with John 3:16, a Bible verse about eternal life through faith. Hattie brings over the missing stewardess's belongings, including a notebook filled with Bible study notes. Realizing the truth, Rayford concludes this was the rapture and admits his wife had been right all along. Hattie refuses to believe it and storms off in frustration. In the cabin, a woman snaps and pulls out a gun, accusing the others of working for her husband to take her daughter. As Cameron carefully tries to calm her down, the attic passenger recalls her religious school teachings and points out that this event matches the description of the rapture, meaning the missing people went to heaven. Overwhelmed with grief, the mother considers ending her life, but Cameron gently shares stories about his bond with his own mother. His words eventually reach her, and she hands over the gun. Moments later, Rayford finally gets a response on the radio and learns that people have vanished worldwide. The airport is packed with crashed planes, making landing impossible, so he's instructed to go inland. Before he can argue, the radio cuts out again. Remembering that Cameron has a satellite phone, Rayford asks him to call Chloe. However, Cameron admits he's been trying all day without success. While showing him the sad note Chloe left on the ticket envelope, Rayford confesses he wants to apologize to her. He admits that his failed marriage wasn't Irene's fault, but his own for always walking away whenever she talked about God. Meanwhile, a devastated Chloe climbs to the top of a bridge. After staring at the city below, she softly apologizes to her mother for how she treated her. Just as Chloe's about to jump, her phone rings. Cameron's call has finally gone through. She answers and hears Rayford's voice. They exchange "I love you" and admit Irene was right. Rayford explains he's unsure if he'll find a place to land, but before he can say more, the signal cuts out. Knowing her dad is alive gives Chloe the strength to step back. She rushes down and runs toward town, grabbing an abandoned bike to move faster. As the plane descends, Rayford warns the passengers about their slim chances and urges them to pray. Meanwhile, Chloe reaches a construction site, jumps into a truck, and clears debris to make space for landing. She manages to call Cameron, and the signal finally connects. She tells her dad she's found a landing spot, and since the plane's guidance system isn't working, Cameron asks for her coordinates. Chloe quickly checks her compass app and gives them before the call abruptly cuts off again. Cameron enters the coordinates into his phone, and Rayford uses them to steer the plane, but it's too dark to see the exact landing spot. Meanwhile, the fuel is nearly gone. Just then, Chloe reconnects the call, and Rayford tells her they need a bigger light since the truck isn't enough. Spotting some gas tanks nearby, Chloe douses them in fuel and tosses a lighter, triggering a massive explosion. Rayford spots the flames and begins his descent. Chloe jumps back into the truck to move away, but distracted by the fire, ends up crashing. As the plane goes down, it clips some cables, causing a brief jolt. The back wheels fail to deploy, making the plane tilt upon landing. The tail and a wing scrape the ground, but Rayford regains control just in time, lifting the wing to avoid hitting Chloe's truck. The plane keeps sliding, crashing into obstacles along the way. It nearly hits a massive gas tank but stops just in time, keeping everyone safe. As the fire Chloe started erupts again, Hattie deploys the inflatable slide, allowing passengers to evacuate. Chloe rushes to embrace Cameron and Rayford, who admits he should have never walked away. She hands him both his and Irene's wedding rings before they all turn toward the burning town in the distance. Cameron calls it the end of the world, but Chloe believes it's just the beginning. While the concept is intriguing, the execution leaves much to be desired. The movie suffers from weak dialogue, inconsistent pacing, and subpar visual effects, making it feel more like a low-budget TV film than a theatrical release.